good day to die.
To really get an accurate look at Silicon Knights 2 Human, there's a laundry list of things you have to be prepared to ignore. Things like the game's 9-year development time, or I guess it's actually a 4-year development time with 9 years since there was a game named 2 Human in development at Silicon Knights. Over the past decade, you know, it's been hard to kind of keep your expectations in check for what this game is going to be and you know how good it's going to be compared to other games that are out there. And if you start to compare it to, you know, it's like, well, you know, a game that took 9 years in development, obviously it's got to be the greatest game ever made, then it's pretty much impossible for the game to meet those expectations. So if you wipe all that away and just look at what 2 Human is, you'll find an interesting action RPG that has some neat ideas to it that don't really come together as well as you might want.
Every day I am reminded of what we are fighting to restore. Every day I am reminded that we fight for the benefit of mankind.
The world of 2 Human is set in Norse mythology, so there's a bunch of Vikings, but it's also set in kind of a futuristic cyber world, so it's cyber Vikings, and you don't really see that a lot, and it's kind of interesting at the outset, even though the game doesn't really do a very effective job of telling its story and setting things up for you at all.
Hey, I'm talking to you, damn it!
You play as Baldur, who is a son of Odin and is a god. You're basically protecting this human city that's being besieged by robots, and you go into cyberspace, and inside cyberspace everything is lush and green and beautiful, whereas the real world is not. So it's an interesting setting because you see, you know, Thor, the god of thunder, with his big Thor's hammer and all that stuff, but at the same time he's wearing all this bulky cyber armor and all these implants and all this weird stuff. So there's some interesting stuff that mixes together pretty well at sometimes, but the game's story isn't really good enough to really exploit any of this stuff properly. So maybe we should just focus on the action of the gameplay itself. In 2 Human, you start out by selecting a character class, and these classes differ in fairly minor ways. You have the champion, that's basically your middle-of-the-road guy that can do just about anything. And then you have shades of offensive and defensive specialization with things like the Berserker, who can dual-wield swords but has no defensive power, making him far less survivable than some of the other classes. So there are some superficial differences between the classes, and you do get a slightly different skill tree with each one that you can spec out as you gain levels and all that stuff, but the real differences are pretty minor, because in the game itself, you're just going to be hacking through hordes of enemies using the same basic weapons and the same basic techniques. The action in 2 Human is all about hordes of enemies running at you and you dealing with them. Your character will slide around from one character to the next as you dish out these attacks. Use the right analog stick to attack. So you'll push in the direction of one guy, he'll slide over with no animation, which looks a little weird. Get over there, attack, then you push in a different direction, he'll slide over there, attack someone else. If you double tap in a direction, you'll perform a pop-up attack. And once they're up in the air, you can actually jump up after them, and it kind of looks like a Marvel vs. Capcom air combo, because the action just kind of freezes in the air, and you can just kind of swing your sword a bunch or perform a finishing move, which then has a little canned animation that performs that will often just kill the enemy outright. These tactics don't really change because you're basically facing the same enemy throughout the entire game. These robots just keep coming. The game doesn't really explain where they're coming from or why, but 3/4 of the game, robots. The 4th, zombies. Robots and zombies. As it turns out, zombies fight a lot like robots, so you don't really need to change your tactics up too heavily. But you will need to change up your tactics to fight trolls. Trolls are actually big robots, and you have to shoot the armor off them or hack the armor away from them, and then from there you can jump up on their back and actually just kind of jab your sword or your hammer or whatever down into whatever robot guts they have and make them blow up, which is kind of satisfying the first time you do it, but you know, when you're doing it once every 10 minutes, it just kind of becomes trivial to fight these larger enemies. The game has 4 separate areas that you go through, and each one has a different look, and the enemies in each area deal slightly different type of damage. So if you spec out your armor a certain way, you can become more resistant to one type of damage over another, making you more effective in one area, but you don't really need to specialize that much because it's not really that difficult of a game to begin with. The 4 different areas reminded me a lot of Phantasy Star Online, and there are some parallels that you can draw between the 2 games. Both games are really designed for you to go back through these areas again and again and again, and really kind of grind out levels as you try to, hit max level. The main reason you want to grind out these levels and play the game over and over again is because you're constantly looking for new loot. So it can kind of be exciting because you're always finding stuff. Armor is broken up into different parts of the body, so you find helmets and shoulders and torsos and legs and boots. And there are also a few other things that you can do to customize those items even further. So there's a lot of different ways to customize your character, and it's nice because the different armor actually looks different on your guy, so no two Balders will look exactly alike most of the time. But since the gameplay doesn't really change and the gameplay isn't especially difficult, it's all kind of for naught.
You always say that. It always is.
The one case where you do get to show off what your Balder is wearing compared to someone else's is in the game's online multiplayer. It's got support for 2 players, and in limited circumstances, this can make a little more sense than the single player because you have cases where some classes work better with other classes, like the Berserker is always going to be taking damage, so the Bioengineer is kind of the healer class, so that can work together, but it's not really a major factor either. The online multiplayer also cuts out all of the story and all of the AI allies that you see throughout the game. So you can't really get the full experience by playing with someone else, which, if you're the sort of person that likes co-op, you probably just want to dive right into co-op right away. But you'll be missing out on the game's storyline if you do that. This just makes the game feel dated. It's 2008, and more often than not, games that offer co-op play throughout the campaign manage to cram at least some form of the story in there. The visuals can also make the game seem a little dated in some spots. Generally speaking, the game looks pretty good. The environments look nice. When you see the character models up close, they look pretty good. But then there are other little things here and there that really stick out. Like, if you're using a two-handed sword and it's on your back because you have your guns out or you're not actively fighting, it doesn't actually attach to the character. You can actually see a little air between the sword and the body. Stuff like that's been solved by now. It's weird to see it in a modern game. Then there's also things like whenever you die, a cyberspace futuristic robot Valkyrie comes down and carries you up to Valhalla, which basically just means you respawn right there where you left off without really much of a real penalty. And every time she comes down, her legs seem to clip through the ground. It just looks bad. And on top of that, the death animation is unskippable, so it's like 15, 20 seconds or something like that, where combat is still raging on, and you're watching this stupid woman come down from space and take you wherever it is that gods go when they die to respawn. It's really easy to be down about a lot of different aspects of 2 Human. Like I said, it's definitely really clunky in spots, and some of the stuff just feels like it was designed for a past era of consoles, not the current generation. Little things like the graphical glitches and the way the co-op doesn't include any of the story just make it seem more like a PlayStation 2 or an Xbox game that's been, visually brought up to par, but the rest of it just doesn't feel like it's all there. But on top of that, I did have fun with 2 Human in a lot of different cases. I think it's just that loot lust, that constant well, if I go hit this guy, he's gonna drop something. If I go into cyberspace and hit A on this puzzle, it's gonna give me new blueprints and I'm gonna go craft additional items or something like that. So there's something to the game. It's not all bad, but there are just too many little things everywhere that detract from the experience to make it worth recommending to everyone.
It bit a man's head off and appeared to drink blood from his neck.
You always say that.